1 minute, if it's okay, just to introduce you to our audience, and then the floor will be yours. And I will do the introduction in Spanish, because we also have the press of the university with us, so they will release a paper note on your conference. But then you can do your participation in English, no problem.
Okay, thank you, gracias.
Excelente, excelente. Bueno, pues, bienvenidos. El día de hoy, como finalización del curso de Introducción Crítica a la Diplomacia de la Ciencia, bienvenidos a la Facultad de Ciencias, pues tenemos el gusto de ofrecerles la conferencia magistral del doctor Irek Suleymanov, quien es profesor asociado del Instituto de Economía de Moscú, pero también es el coordinador de Relaciones Internacionales del Joint Institute, que es el Instituto Conjunto de Investigación Nuclear de Rusia, que fíjense ustedes, valdría la pena decir que este instituto es una institución similar al CERN, porque se compone de la participación de muchos países que se han unido para generar infraestructuras de investigación en aceleradores de partículas y en otras áreas de la física. Entonces, es un instituto que utilizan muchos países de Asia y pues es un ejemplo de la diplomacia de la ciencia. El doctor Irek, él se graduó de doctorado en la Universidad Pedagógica Estatal de Ulyanov y también ha hecho estudios de economía en la Escuela Superior de Colonia, en Alemania, y en la Universidad Libre de Berlín. También anteriormente fue el jefe de División de Cooperación Internacional, Integración de Ciencia y Tecnología en el Ministerio Ruso de Estudios de Educación y de Ciencia. Y bueno, desde el 2020 trabaja en el Joint Institute y es un experto en los temas de diplomacia de la ciencia, que de hecho va a ser muy interesante para ustedes conocer esta perspectiva desde Rusia. Ya saben que siempre nos llegan más bien las perspectivas desde Estados Unidos y otros lados. Entonces, esto va a ser una gran oportunidad. Y comentarles también como pequeño anuncio que México acaba de firmar con el Joint Institute para ser un país miembro igual que del CERN, ¿no? Y esto va a permitir que haya intercambios y que los grupos de investigación mexicanos también puedan beneficiarse de la colaboración con el Joint Institute. Así que, pues, bienvenidos. Irek, we are very honored to have you at UNAM, and the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, first of all, it's really a great honor for me to speak to you, and I'm sincerely grateful to Dr. Pasifal Morales and to Professor Anna Maria Chetto. As one of our contemporaries said, speaking about science diplomacy, we are already doing science diplomacy. So I hope that our dialogue will contribute not only to the theory of science diplomacy, but also to the praxis of science diplomacy. And today, the title of my lecture, of my talk, contains the world journey. So I propose to go on a journey from Mexico City to Dubna in the Moscow region in Russia. I hope my presentation will allow it. So we are now in Mexico and we move to Dubna. I hope it works. So here you can see one of our facilities. It's a new collider Nika, located in Dubna in Moscow region. So here you can see some basic information about our institute. So it's a kind of business card of our organization. JNR, the Joint Institute for Nuclear Research, is an international intergovernmental organization that unites 15 countries, 15 member states, and researchers from more than 30 countries worldwide. JNR ranks second place among international organizations in terms of the number of employees. You can see it on the slide. JNR is first and foremost a scientific research organization, and scientific results, scientific excellence are the main goal and result of our organization. But the motto of the Joint Institute for Nuclear Research is "Science brings nations together." At the very least, this reference point makes us look at this phenomenon through the lens of science diplomacy theory and praxis. And here I must say that JNR positions its connection with the concept of science diplomacy. For example, and you can see here some extracts on the screen. For example, in November 2021, our supreme governing body, the Committee of Plenipotentiaries of the governments of our member states, adopted a so-called Sofia Declaration on the value of international integration in science and technology. And this document secured and stipulated the special role of science diplomacy in the profile of our Institute for the Future. You can see here this wording: strengthen the role of JNR as the unique integrating site for development of modern instruments applied by the member states and partner countries in science diplomacy, promoting of science and intellectual exchange. Here, maybe just to put it into some context, the phenomenon of international organizations is not as young as it seems, and this is true especially for scientific organizations. As you know, the very concept of science diplomacy is more than a century younger than the concept of an international organization. As you can see, the Scottish law professor James Lorimer first used the term international organization already in 1871. You can see here a copy of the first edition of Revue Droit International. And frequently he used this term in his works from 1880 as well. So other early adopters included Walter Shocking and Paul Range and so on. The International Telecommunication Union, founded in 1865, was the first and oldest international organization created through a treaty establishing a permanent secretariat and including global membership. So I would, as some grandparents of our institute, I would mention and name also the International Union of Pure and Applied Chemistry, the International Union of Pure and Applied Physics. They were found in the first quarter of the last century, as you can see on the screen. On this slide, you see also the statistics, although it is not new. But the trend is important for us. The interest and quantity of international organizations is growing. We show in this figure that there has been a tremendous increase in the number of informal and formal international organizations during the post-war era. And this time, the 50s of the 20th century of previous century our journey into the past to origins of science diplomacy in the format of international intergovernmental organizations. This new legal status appears in the new architecture of the post-war world. I mean, the world after the World War II. And this new legal order is largely oriented towards the implemented model of the World Organization, the United Nations. So it was also a legal format for the Joint Institute for Nuclear Research. When we accept the definition for international intergovernmental organization given by the Harvard Law School, so we could accept the following wording. The term intergovernmental organization, IGO, refers to an entity created by treaty involving two or more nations to work in good faith on issues of common interest. And here we have three main elements of this phenomenon. There should be a treaty, two or more nations, it's clear, and issues of common interest. Here we should pay special attention to the term treaty. It's a formal, legally binding written agreement between sovereign states or international organizations. It is governed by international law. The key word, it is legally binding. So it is connected with obligations for governments. And it means also for participating member states that they delegate a teeny part of their sovereignty to this new entity. Here you can see also a copy of founding agreement on the establishment of a joint institute for nuclear research, and Article 1 stipulates to provide for collaboration in the field of theoretical and experimental nuclear physics research among the scientists of this states. To this agreement, an international research organization named the Joint Institute for Nuclear Research shall be established. And here maybe some analogy just to generalize a common understanding of international intergovernmental organizations as a phenomenon of science diplomacy. I've tried to create such an analogy. States or member states, to be correct, they contribute to create a joint masterpiece. You can see on the right part of the slide Mona Lisa. So this is the goal, the common goal of participating member states. They transfer pains and competencies, giving them to the artist palette. It is important to realize that as soon as a member state has transferred its contribution to an international organization, it can no longer, in terms of paints, it can't be scraped off and returned to the tube of paint. This is also some analogy to the international law in terms of obligations resulting from the treaty establishing an international organization. And it is precisely this aspect that allows us to talk about a certain security emancipation of workspace of an international intergovernmental organization. It is independent. It is, roughly speaking, a separate state. It's comparable in its functions and options. And here it is possible to avoid an ethical dilemma that we have with scientists in terms of science diplomacy, especially if we interpret science diplomacy as something that we do to in a peacekeeping from the peacekeeping from a point of view, because this position is quite often uh, has some touch of ambiguity if we observe it in terms of national interests. And if we observe this ethical dilemma, it is often said that a scientist who is an actor of science diplomacy, he is paid as a rule by a state, and especially if we speak about basic research, researchers in that area, they get their money from public budgets, and it would somehow support the position that the state, if we're working, can dictate to the scientist what to do. In terms of international research organization, this dilemma, this challenge is somehow solved because of the legal status of this new entity. Sure, IGOs have the financial and political support of its members, but it doesn't mean direct influence. So it opened new opportunities for science diplomacy for its functionality. But back to our concrete case today, to the Joint Institute for Nuclear Research. So agreement regarding creation of the Joint Institute of Nuclear Research was signed on the 26th of March in 1856 by representatives of 11 founding countries. I think it is important to name them. Albania, Bulgaria, Hungary, German Democratic Republic, Republic of China, Korean Democratic Republic, Mongolia, Poland, Romania, USSR, and Czechoslovakia. In September 1956, agreement on the creation of GINR was also signed by a representative of the government of Democratic Republic of Vietnam. So you can see that all founding members of GINR, they belonged to so-called socialistic bloc in terms of Cold War linguistics. Here you can see on the screen also a very interesting document. It is a copy of a certificate of registration. So GINR was registered with the United Nations in 1957, and this document is signed by the, I would say, legendary Secretary General Doug Hammersmith in April 1957. So now let us enjoy some historical chronicle. I hope you can hear it. So, an impressive chronicle. I hope you enjoyed it. And it shows success of the first years of the Young International Organization of GINR. But you can quite well understand that this picture is only the tip of the iceberg. If above the surface of the water we see the positive phase of science diplomacy, you can see here on the slide dialogue, recognition, cooperation, context, exchange, and even globalization. But then under the water, there is another less attractive side of science diplomacy. If we understand this concept broadly, not only taking into account the positive surface, but also a negative interpretation of science diplomacy instruments, such as severance of context, sanctions, non-dialogue, non-recognition, sovereignty, hermetization of cooperation, and even isolation. So we understand that the birth of the new organization took place in the contradictory period of so-called Cold War. We must admit that this we should also we have an opportunity to look to the newspapers from the year 1956. I used archive of British press, and you can see these wordings. Pontecorvo is working in a new atomic city. So Bruno Pontecorvo is, he was a famous Italian scientist, a legendary Italian physicist, and convicted communist who suddenly finds himself in the USSR, in the Soviet Union, and he would conduct research at the Joint Institute for Nuclear Research. Here you can see all the examples. World's biggest, most of them, of scientists, were Russians, but 50 scientists from other communist countries are expected to join the staff next year. So ideological wording is also presented. Then Pontecorvo takes over red atoms. Another example is here. Atomgrad is a copy-paste from Russian. Atom City or Nuclear City is named. Russia has disclosed the location of its secret atomic city. So secret, atomic. You can see this charm of espionage and the spirit of Agent 007 is also somehow felt. Here we go to the situation before the signing of agreement about establishment of the Joint Institute for Nuclear Research, just to understand this historical context. Coincidentally or not, but 1949, so 7 years before the establishment of the Joint Institute of Nuclear Research, and 5 years before the establishment of CERN, of the European Organization for Nuclear Research, this particular year will be a special year, both for Dubna, for the future GINR, and for the future CERN. On December 14th, 1949, it was a historic day when the synchrocyclotron, the first basic facility of GINR, of the future GINR, will be commissioned. It was a very important record facility, large research infrastructure. But the very important detail is that this facility and the results that were produced by this facility, everything was classified, so top secret. But at the same time, in December 1949, French physicist Louis de Broglie put forward the first official proposal for the creation of a European laboratory at the European Cultural Conference, which opened in Lausanne. Then we can read it on the slide at the UNESCO meeting in Paris in December 1951. There was a discussion on finding a solution to have a medium energy accelerator for the soon to be formed European Organization for Nuclear Research. So we can see here a couple of coincidences which show us also the spirit of competition, even in the very specific circumstances of secrecy and of the general atmosphere of Cold War. Here, you can see also some key words of those period. That first of all, the European Atomic Physics Laboratory, this old wording that we can see on the screen, that it was proposed, it was initiated by scientists. So American physicist and Nobel laureate Isidore Rabi tabled the resolution authorizing UNESCO to assist and encourage the formation of regional research laboratories in order to increase international scientific cooperation. It is important to note and keep in mind that this model, that this mixture of foreign policy, of national interests, of science and technology policy and competition, this mixture that we put while defining the term of science diplomacy, it is still important that these initiatives, the initiatives, such large and important initiatives, they were articulated by scientists, even if they were primarily driven by national interests, by politicians, and so on. But we will observe this miracle of evolution of this national interest into global activities. And we can note also very interesting combination of words and numbers. So laboratory, we will see later that the Soviet government will initiate establishment of a Eastern nuclear laboratory for nuclear research. 11 countries. You've already heard today this number. GINR had exactly 11 founding countries and first member states. And 1949, we've already mentioned a very specific year in this technological competition between East and West. Here we move into some archives. You can see here declassified documents from the Soviet, from the archives of the Central Committee of Communist Party of the Soviet Union. You can see this old wording that these documents were top secret, were classified. And the first one is from the year 1955 on the organization of the Eastern Nuclear Research Laboratory by People's Democracies. Here, first of all, let's pay attention to the left part of the slide. Here, during the International Scientific and Technical Conference on the Peaceful Use of Atomic Energy among physicists, I written it in red, So you can see this analogy. CERN was initiated by physicists, and this Eastern Nuclear Research Laboratory was initiated among physicists in Poland, Czechoslovakia, and Hungary. So considerations are being expressed about the need to create an Eastern Nuclear Research Laboratory. And the next sentence started with exactly the sibling, the name of the sibling. The European Nuclear Research Laboratory was established in 1952 by agreement between 10 European countries, Belgium and Yugoslavia. So it was the first step to build CERN, because CERN was created in 1954. So although the United States does not directly participate in the laboratory was organized on their initiative. Here you can see also this competition that international organizations, they have a host country or maybe more host countries, but it should be some host country. But the tricky situation with CERN was that it was located in Western Europe, but initiated and supported by the United States, which was a difficult case for the Soviet Union in terms of Cold War situation. So then on the right part, we can see following statement. We believe that the USSR and people's democracies should organize the Eastern Nuclear Research Laboratory and build serious accelerators, nuclear reactors, and other laboratories within it. The creation of the laboratory will allow the people's democracies to jointly provide conditions for the fruitful work of their scientists. And here, if we observe this text through the lens of the theory of science diplomacy, let's take, for example, utilitarian approach or strategy purposes approach. It says us that science diplomacy is about promoting, it's about influence, it's about access in terms of a national science diplomacy. And here you can see it. So this new entity, this new laboratory would mean for its member states, from the states from Eastern Bloc, or using the vocabulary of this secret document, people's democracies, it would allow them to have this access to cutting-edge research facilities and technologies. But on the other hand, sure, it would mean also, because the Soviet Union could be a host country, host state, it would mean also some opportunity to perform influence, to set the scientific agenda, and not only ensure, it is also about promotion of own scientific agenda on the platform of this research organization. So, and then, but the cooperation with the European Nuclear Research Laboratory is also possible if we look to the following paragraph. When the first physical installations are completed and the first work is carried out, it will be possible to enter into an agreement with the European Nuclear Research Laboratory to exchange some research data and to give the employees of the European laboratory at the Eastern Laboratory the opportunity to work here and there. It is also a very particular, very important message. Even if we must take it into consideration. It's a top secret document about creating a new entity, but it included from the beginning this not only possibility, the need to cooperate with other partners, with even with competitors. And it is also about the nature of science diplomacy, which unites both contradictory directions, competition and collaboration, building a very specific field of specific instruments of science diplomacy. In this way, cooperation could be ensured and harmful isolation would be avoided. So, and the last sentence is also interesting. Geographically more convenient point could be Kiev, USSR, Prague, Czechoslovakia, etc. So there is no word about Dubna, about Moscow region. So here we see also some attempt to build an analogy. Here we see a pragmatic perception of national or bloc science diplomacy, which is largely typical for the Cold War times. It must ensure the achievement of national or bloc ideologically determined goals. And here science diplomacy, and I'm provoking, acts as a Trojan horse. But in fact, and we will observe it later, this horse comes to life, comes to an actor, or became an actor of science diplomacy. So secret documents or declassified documents, they clearly show how negative science diplomacy can lead to positive results, surprisingly. The fact that CERN, despite the serious desire of the USSR to join the organization, actually refuses, this is what begins to alarm the Soviet government. And the pendulum of science diplomacy, which you can see on the left side of your screen, so this pendulum of science diplomacy swung from cooperation to competition. Well, and in competition, the main thing is to win, to assemble a large team of participants. This is a completely different logic, which is conditioned by the frustrating destruction of trust on the part of the West. And here you can see another already declassified document. It is a draft letter sent to the leadership of the communist parties of Poland, Czechoslovakia, East Germany, Hungary, Bulgaria, Romania, on the issue of creating Eastern Nuclear Research Laboratory. Here you can see following. The Central Committee believes that the USSR and people's democracies should not join the European Nuclear Research Laboratory, and it would be advisable for the people's democracies to organize the Eastern Nuclear Research Laboratory. Here I should deliver some comment. The USSR, according to the declassified documents, was willing to participate, to join this CERN. It is difficult to believe, but it's a documented fact. But CERN refused to accept the Soviet Union as a possible member state. Sure, too large, too powerful, too ideological, and so on. But at the same time, CERN tried to allocate new member states in Eastern Europe, for example, Yugoslavia or Poland, and so on. And these discrepancies, it was exactly the alarm clock for the Soviet government, that the policy of CERN is dictated not only by scientists. It seems to be a huge policy in geopolitics, which is oriented to the domination of United States also in scientific area in Western Europe. And it was somehow a catalyst to push the efforts to establish a competitor, a very strong international research organization in Eastern Bloc. Here, we should pay attention to the following sentence. The scientific and technical assistance that the USSR has undertaken to provide to people's democracies will contribute to the development of such a laboratory. So here we can see that Soviet Union is ready to invest into this success story. So another number of interesting documents from previously secret archives. Here we can see the juggling of names from Eastern to Joint. So behind each name, but we've already heard Eastern Laboratory for Nuclear Research. Here we can see other formulations. So a couple of days before the signing of the founding agreement. Here you can see International Center for Nuclear Research. Previously, in other documents, there was the Eastern Institute for Nuclear Research, and so on. But sure, we understand that behind each name of the future organization stands its future and its, if you want, ideology. Thus, in the documents, the Eastern Laboratory evolves into Eastern Institute and later into the Joint Institute for Nuclear Research. There comes a transformation from the logic of a regional laboratory to the logic of an international global organization. And here I must give you a linguistic commentary. The fact is that joint, объединенный in Russian, sounds the same as united. And in 1956, when Nikita Khrushchev, the head of the Soviet state, clearly had the United Nations spinning in his head, it is no coincidence that exactly he acts as a final editor of the text and takes the word объединенный. So in Russian, it's the same as united. And here you can see that this the idea behind this naming. It should be not just an original laboratory. It should be a real international global organization. And we can see it also on the fact of the composition that it was in discussion, which countries should be invited to be member states. And we see in these secret documents, India, sure, China, even Egypt. So the logic of a competitive advantage will determine a phenomenal, if not revolutionary, decision of the Soviet government. The USSR will decide to provide the International Institute with two ultra-modern but secret institutes with equipment that has no analogs worldwide. So it was really a very strong decision, but in terms of competition. Here we can see also some quotes from secret documents of those times from the year 1956. If it's considered advisable to locate the institute in the USSR, because we recall that there were other locations in discussions, the Central Committee of the Communistic Party of the Soviet Union considers it possible to transfer to its composition the Institute of Nuclear Problems located in the Moscow region. So this institute, this is the name for two secret laboratories created in the 40s of last century, 100 kilometers from Moscow, so far away from the capital, due to secrecy reasons. And Soviet Union was ready to invest this contribution to the common success of the new organization. So while the European laboratory is just under construction and its accelerators can be launched only in a few years, the Eastern Institute, if it's located on the basis of the existing Institute of Nuclear Problems, will be able to immediately provide our scientists with good conditions for productive work. And here you can see this this starting situation, this starting point. These pictures clearly show that at the time of the beginning of the construction of CERN, the future GINR already had a top-class infrastructure. You can see it on the right part of the slide, and on the left side, you can see the picture taken on May 17, 1954. The first shovel of earth was dug on the Marine site in Switzerland under the eyes of Geneva officials and members of CERN staff. But as you understand, all the advantages are also disadvantages. After all, in essence, the model that socialist countries followed is the internationalization of national research infrastructure and even secret infrastructure. Of course, this is a certain specificity that has become a legacy to this day. It is difficult. It is all about difficult logistics. After all, secret laboratories are not built in the most crowded places, as you can imagine. It is an existing infrastructure, while competitors can at this time overtake and build something better and more modern, especially in a competitive environment. This temptation to duplicate exhausts all partners or participants in this scientific race. Here, just to sum up the essential aims of GINR with and compare them with the aims and key pillars of science diplomacy concept in terms of strategic purposes approach. Sure, as already mentioned, it is about access, about promotion and influence, and we can see how these ideas, that we can read these ideas in the original papers from those years. So essential aims of the center, the Joint Institute for Nuclear Research, are clearly set out in the Moscow Agreement. So to foster collaboration in nuclear research by scientists in the member states, to promote nuclear physics research in the member states by exchange of information and results, to maintain close relations with other national and international scientific research organizations, to promote the most effective use of intellectual effort available in member states. Here, let's see also some papers from those times and observe them through the lens of science diplomacy theory. So one of the ideas of science diplomacy, if we take the national point of view, is promotion, marketing of countries' achievements in the research and development. And here you can see following extracts from British newspapers. Need for more scientists, UK outstripped by US and Russia. You can see this competition for scientists, and in the opposite, another article, all scientists are welcome, so says Soviet. So scientists from all countries were welcomed to the new joint institute, to the new joint institute of nuclear research at Dubna. It's not Dubna, it's Dubna, on the Volga River, in a special broadcast in English last night by Moscow radio. So it is also a piece of propaganda, if you want. Here, another pillar in terms of science diplomacy theory, sure, it is access, improvement of national innovation capacity, and competitiveness by better benchmarking international research and development trends and policies. Here you can see following article, Berlin plans to catch up in a race to use atomic energy. It is about West Berlin, but it shows, I've already mentioned that East Germany joined to the Joint Institute of Nuclear Research, and it meant also connection to new and modern peaceful nuclear technologies, producing energy. It was extremely important in this to have this access. And the third pillar here, influence, addressing the most explicit political and soft power aspects of science diplomacy, influencing other countries' public opinion, decision maker, and political or economic leaders. Here you can see also articles from those times. Nuclear laboratory for Cairo or Russia to send equipment and specialists to Egypt. So we understand that it instrumentalizes also some approaches of soft power. Another article says Soviet bloc set up Atom Institute. So Soviet bloc as a space of influence of Soviets, of the Soviet Union, also in terms of scientific competition. But here I should mention or quote our fellow Leo Aigner, science diplomacy also originated from the scientists themselves. So the situation with the political pragmatism of a scientific perspective would be too sad and destructive, and probably not worthy of our conversation today. But thank God that science diplomacy has many parents, and among whom there are also scientists. Those same people who profess the international nature, international nature of science. And here we come back to our knowledge you've already seen. So traditional taxonomy of science diplomacy, you're aware, science in diplomacy, diplomacy for science, science for diplomacy. But science diplomacy on the platform of international organizations, especially international intergovernmental organizations, it is not only the sum of science diplomacies of member states, as you can see on the left. Science diplomacy of the members, say state 1 and 2 and 3 and n. It is largely an independent diplomacy where the voice of science sounds loudest. This is the advantage of this legal form. We've spoken about a treaty, about international law at the beginning of our talk. So this is the advantage of the legal form and its multilateral supranational nature. So thanks to this emancipation, I call this a medium space, a meta space for international cooperation. It appears and gives science diplomacy new strength and new interpretation, if you want. If you remember that pendulum, it is in the sphere of cooperation and global thinking. Here, coming back to the situation around 1956. Over the past decade and a half, historians have been actively rethinking the bipolar picture of the Cold War. And here I would quote Roman Gandoshko. He wrote, in this new Cold War history, great emphasis is placed on the sphere of scientific contacts, which in the 1950s, 80s, took on the role of a politics-free, neutral zone, both for diplomatic purposes and for economic and technological competition in isolation from political sensitives. And I like the term formulated by Georgi Peteri. So we should speak not about Iron Curtain, we should speak, in fact, about nylon curtain. So, and GINR fits in this model very well. The historical metamorphosis will consist of two rivals, GINR and competitors, GINR and CERN becoming a bridge uniting competing ideologies and worlds, East and West. This phenomenon will exist for decades and so far has withstood the challenges of the new geopolitical storm. But let's see where the journey along these waves in science diplomacy take us. And here you can see also some extracts of original documents of 60s, for example, from Europhysics newsletter. However, the first collaboration with physicists from the Soviet Union was with the Joint Institute for Nuclear Research. And at the same time, I would also mention a very beautiful analogy formulated by Roman Gandoshko, quantum tunneling through the Iron Curtain. So this metaspace created by two international organizations was able to deliver a special place, a special space for cooperation of scientists and for dialogue of representatives of rivals such as USSR and US and Western world. And this is really an exciting example of working science diplomacy, which encourages us to do more for this concept current times. So thank you for your attention, and I would be happy to answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Irek. Very interesting talk. Y se abre el escenario para preguntas. Si requieren ayuda para preguntar en español y que la traduzcamos, también con muchísimo gusto. Sí, adelante.
Bueno, son tres preguntas. Bueno, sabemos que la Unión Soviética, todo comenzó con una competición con Estados Unidos. ¿Qué beneficios trajo la fusión nuclear o todo lo nuclear, en beneficio hacia la Unión Soviética? Porque sabemos que el CER es europeo y otros países, pero no sé cómo decirlo.
Instituto.
Instituto es especialmente para la Unión Soviética. Y de ahí ayudó a otros países como Checoslovaquia, Armenia y no sé qué otro.
Bueno.
¿Cuál es el beneficio con esos países y cuál es el beneficio hacia el mundo? Si es que, porque lo están promoviendo, porque lo quieren promover. Esa es la primera pregunta, no sé si está bien más o menos.
Sí.
La segunda es cómo está viendo los reactores nucleares que está haciendo China a través del torio, que están manejando ellos, nomás el puro, lo que entendí, el puro radio. Entonces, ¿cuál es ahorita que China está manejando el torio y qué beneficios, o si va a haber una diplomacia con ellos hacia con Estados Unidos? Creo que es así.
Okay, so I will translate, Irek.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
So, our student is asking two questions. The first one is, what is, in your opinion, the main benefits on the side of the Soviet Union and the Eastern countries that were gained from the establishment of the Joint Institute, in comparison, of course, to the benefits that the Western countries got from establishing the CERN? This is the first question. And the second question is, in today's world, what is your opinion on the new reactors that China is currently developing that are using thorium instead of other elements, as our student understood that most of the research happening at the Joint Institute is dealing with other kinds of reactors. And of course, if China is also participating in the Joint Institute, what is your perspective about China's race currently?
Thank you very much. If you allow, I would start with the second question. It was my mistake not to mention the core areas of research of our institute. So our research center is dealing only with basic research. So it is not connected to nuclear energy. It is basic research of fundamental matters, of fundamental properties of the matter. So neutrino, the structure of atomic structures, or producing of new chemical elements, and so on. But it's connected with nuclear energy. It is more the cup of beer, so to say, of other institutes. So in that sense, I unfortunately I can't give you an expertise. But at the same time, I would also mention that China is not our member state, but there is also an interesting story, because China was one of 11 founding countries of the Joint Institute of Nuclear Research in 1956, but China left JNR, if I'm correct, in 1964. It was during the time of Cultural Revolution in China, and generally China left a lot of international organizations, and the Joint Institute for Nuclear Research wasn't an exception. And until now, China is not a member state of our international organization, but we have cooperation agreements with Chinese institutes, and even with Chinese Ministry of Science and Technology, but they are not about nuclear energy research. They are more about basic research, which is far away from direct technological implementation. So then to the first question regarding benefits for Eastern European countries and the Soviet Union, benefits from the Joint Institute of Nuclear Research. Sure, maybe we should start also with the Western sibling of JNR, with CERN, and understand the situation at those times. So CERN was created in 1954, so 9 years after the end of the World War II. And you should imagine that Nazi Germany and a lot of other countries, they are already the forefront of research which was connected to atomic weapons, to nuclear weapons. And it was a very important issue for all competitor countries. I mean, Soviet Union, United States, France, and the Great Britain, that after World War II, the danger of possible nuclear weapon research in Western Europe should be somehow solved. And because of that, United States, I would say, invited some of researchers to the venues on the territory of United States, Manhattan Project, and so on. But a lot of scientists remained not only brilliant scientists, so very normal scientists, but they were able to find a way to a nuclear weapon. But it was important to control them. And for this purpose, the US initiated to create an organization which offered them brilliant possibilities to use their knowledge in peaceful way, in fundamental, in basic research. And because of that, if we observe also the historical documents, there were also a huge discussion where to build CERN. And very strong positions had Niels Bohr, famous physicist, with Copenhagen, because they had brilliant infrastructure which wasn't destroyed during the World War II. So, and if we are pragmatic, we would say, sure, we should build there. There's a good possibility. But at the same time, it would mean that Western European scientists, that they have already all equipment to possibly create something which could be not acceptable for Americans, for example. And because of that, there was taken the decision to build this new organization, new facilities in the field. You've seen this picture. It was, I don't know, a village near Geneva without any infrastructure. And sure, it took a lot of time and energy and resources to build it from the 0 point. But sure, for post-war countries, and we should keep in mind that still the main competence contributor to the success of CERN, it was scientific community of Germany. They had this experience. They were on the forefront of nuclear research. So, and sure, but after this discussion, after this maybe previous intentions to build such a center, CERN became a real scientific pool, a real scientific organization which delivers for all its member states brilliant results and access to the cutting edge research. And coming back to the Soviet Union, sure, it was also the idea to give for the scientists from Eastern European countries the best possibilities to perform world-class research. But unfortunately, in all East European countries, there was no possibility to use the research infrastructure already existed. And it was also this very dramatic decision of the Soviet government to invest in secret laboratories as a contribution and as and this advantage in this competition with West European partners. Sure, it was also, I would say, a very important element, and in comparison with CERN, that GINR was not only a research center, it is not only a research center, it is also an educational center, because since 1956, thousands of young researchers, they was educated for national research systems of member states, because they are also important to develop, I don't know, atomic energy in these countries. If we think about Eastern Germany, they had this very good supply with atomic energy resources, or if we speak about other Eastern European countries. So it was everything about access to the technologies. It was also about keeping a high scientific potential, because in this competition, because it was already such a level of research facilities that a normal Eastern European state wasn't able to build, because it was so costly that even for the Soviet Union, it wasn't easy to build such an infrastructure and to collect these resources. It was also a very important synergetic effect for member states of GNR. Sorry for this long answer.
Thank you, thank you. ¿Alguna otra pregunta? Anímense.
Pues yo tengo una, pero no sé si me podría ayudar a formularla.
¿Cómo no?
Es el área de Latinoamérica es una zona de desarrollo, ¿no? Tiene mucho potencial de colaboración, pero que también tiene esas relaciones. Si tendría sentido invertir para nosotros en una colaboración como la que ellos hicieron en específico en esta área versus otras. ¿No?
Ok.
O sea, es algo que nos puede ayudar como región, en su opinión.
Claro. So there is another question. For Latin America, in your perspective, where we don't have traditionally very big investments in quantum science or in nuclear science or in big science at all, what is the potential that you see of Latin American countries joining and investing in partnerships such as the joint institute?
Sure, I would say that Latin America has good potentials regarding human resources. You have very good universities, but sure, the research infrastructure it is something costly, and it is very clever to use already existing facilities to improve your own potentials, to educate your future scientists. They will be able to perform a cutting-edge research using this very modern research infrastructure. And I would say that your government is already thinking about this cooperation, about using the possibilities to very precisely invest in joint projects, for example, with our institute, to use this already existing research infrastructure to achieve world level research results, and to move into this group of leading research countries. So this place, I would say that it is also about conditions for such a cooperation, because if we speak about the format of international intergovernmental organizations, they have not only member states that are obliged to contribute their annually contribution to the budget, but sure, they have for this the right to take decisions on the agenda of an international research organization. But on the other hand, there are also other formats of cooperation. For example, associated membership, which means that the respective government or partner ministry decides which experiments are interesting for through the lens of your national priorities. Maybe you're facing now difficulties, I don't know, with nuclear medicine, and you need specialists in this area and knowledge in this precisely area. And this format of cooperation agreements, that allow you to participate exactly and very focused in such joint research projects. So in that context, I would say there is a variety of instruments to use different formats of science diplomacy to improve Latin America's scientific potential.
Otra pregunta. I may just make a comment, Irek, that very interesting your talk, and we really like the historical and critical analysis that you made about the history of the Joint Institute, because usually, you know, the broad sense of science diplomacy is something that is inherently positive, but no one talks about the hidden interests of science diplomacy, and the fact that you really have this in account, and at the end you come to the conclusion that it's more about the science, the diplomacy of science. Science has something that has also political interests and, of course, positive desires, but also negative ones. I think this is perfect because it's also the kind of view that we encourage for our students to think during our course. So that just as a comment, that we like very much this perspective on your talk.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, first of all. And I hope very much that it fits in the framework of your course, Critical Introduction to Science Diplomacy. And I thought that a portion of critics should be included into my talk about the history of science diplomacy in terms of the Joint Institute for Nuclear Research. and thank you very much for your comment.
You're welcome. Pregunta, comentario. Sí, adelante. Another question.
Sí,
Thank you.
de valores que se expuso en la analogía del iceberg, ¿cuál fue que considera como clave para que se pudieran realizar estas preguntas?
Okay. So he is recalling your analogy of the iceberg, and the question is, of all these values, positive and negatives that you are representing, which do you think was the key one to foster the creation of the Joint Institute itself?
Oh, very good question. But I would say there is a couple of, it is a couple of cooperation and isolation. So it was really a tendency to develop cooperation in the post-World War II time. And if you read these secret documents, you're really surprised by the fact that the Soviet Union considered joining the European Organization of Nuclear Research. And on the other hand, it is also a very pragmatic assessment of possible isolation. And sure, it was an instrument performed and developed by Western countries. So they tried to isolate Soviet Union. And I would say these two elements, they were crucial to create for creating of the establishment of the Joint Institute of Nuclear Research. But it is also the nature of science diplomacy concept, which is a blurry concept. I think it is a quote of Leo Agner. Because it is a field that we can somehow put in a framework of competition, collaboration on one X, and then politics and science with national and global dimension. So so this ambiguity, it is also a driving power of science diplomacy.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
¿Una otra?
Nosotros, yo creo que es un comentario.
Sí, adelante.
Yo creo que con el ambiente actual político global que necesitamos, vemos muchas incidencias o una gran aparición de fanatismo que muchas veces se aleja del lado científico. Pues creo que este tipo de pláticas pues, nos recuerda nuestra obligación participativa, pero también colaborativa y sobre todo pues, la responsabilidad que tenemos de la ciencia a mantenernos en ese camino, ¿no? O sea, a compartirlo y recordar que lo hacemos para todos, no solamente para los intereses como el platicador.
Okay. So it was a commentary from one of our students that talks like yours, it's always a recall that go away from polarization and fanatism, which are something happening in the current time, no? And that science especially is an area to keep in mind these values and see that these joint initiatives can help going, let's say, in the way of peace.
Exactly. This peacekeeping function of science diplomacy, despite the fact the science diplomacy has many faces, also very pragmatic, very national oriented, but it has also this peacekeeping phase connected with the international nature of science and especially with basic research, basic sciences, because basic research is not directly connected to technologies, and technologies, they are about economy and economic competition and so on, and at that part it begins to be very difficult to speak about science diplomacy and peacekeeping. But if we are on the field of basic research, it is really a very fruitful field to develop initiatives in science diplomacy and affect relationships between, firstly, scientists from different and partially conflicting countries, and then between respective nations.
Thank you. And maybe, Irek, it just comes to my mind that nowadays there is a usual confusion about science advice and science diplomacy. No? But I like to take also your analogy of the painting, thinking about this peacekeeping function of science diplomacy. And for me, it would be that maybe science advice is just saying to the artist, take that color, no? But the science diplomacy, in fact, even it has not a very specific application. Maybe it's not even data-driven, no? It's really the great accomplishment, no? To keep really the countries to cooperate in peace and to do these spaces where scientists can devote to something that at the end is for the benefit of humanity and not for the harm of humanity itself.
Exactly, fully agree. Exactly. Thank you.
No sé si haya otra pregunta. Ya cerraríamos. So, see, so just for our students, because many of them are from the undergraduate in physics and mathematics and so on, is there a way for them as students to keep in touch with the Joint Institute and be aware of things that are happening?
Sure, of course. First of all, we have our homepage and we have our weekly newsletter. And sure, you can read there about our fellowship programs, about different possibilities to build connections with our institute. For example, during COVID time, we developed a remote program for master students and young researchers that can remotely participate in our small research projects, and then if it's interesting for both parties, even come to the Joint Institute for Nuclear Research for real research projects. I would provide I would say send the address of our homepage, but it's very simple. It's ginr.ru or ginr.int.
Perfect. We will also circulate that by email with our students so they can be in touch.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it very much. Then I'll send a short information brochure about our institute, and I would be happy if it could be interesting for the students at your university.
Excellent. So, if there are no more questions, Irek, it was a really great pleasure for us at UNAM to have you as part of these distinguished lectures on science diplomacy. And we hope that the collaboration between Mexico and Russia and the Joint Institute will continue. And thank you very much. Let's give him an applause.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I appreciate this honor very much. And so I hope and very looking forward continuing our cooperation. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Have a nice day.
Have a nice day.